Hey everybody, and welcome to the Adventures in Angular show. This week on our panel we have Ward Bell.
Hello, hello.
Joe Eames.
Hey everybody.
Alyssa Nichol.
Howdy.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. And this week we have a special guest, and that's Ciro Nunes.
Hi there.
Now, do you want to give us a brief introduction since you haven't been on the show for a while?
Okay. So I'm the lead front-end engineer of CrossEngage, this up-and-coming startup from Berlin in the marketing tech market. I'm also a Google developer expert in web technologies and mostly Angular.
Awesome. Well, we brought you on to talk about the migration that you're doing at CrossEngage. Do you want to give us just a brief description of how that app was set up before you started and what you're kind of aiming toward as you migrate it?
Sure. So actually, when I first looked at the app, it was a bit scared because it was a mix of a lot of things, and it wasn't easy to actually figure out the build structure and all the setup. It was using a mix of Browserify and Babel and some other very custom gulp tasks to wire it all up. So that was actually the scenario. And then as we have all the nice and new stuff in Angular, mostly the tooling and all the performance improvements that we need at CrossEngage, we decided to tame this beast and actually start the migration. So right now we're at this stage where we have a hybrid application, and we actually didn't have the very nice talk of Vitor Savkin when we first started our migration. The talk from Vitor about upgrading enterprise applications. And then we actually didn't have a very nice and well-defined strategy when we first started. So then we faced a lot of problems, and it was very interesting, the path so far. We learned a lot, and now we're basically looking for this vertical upgrading. So we're taking the routes and making sure that we upgrade everything necessary to have only either Angular.js or Angular in the page in the same moment. So basically, yeah.
Have you ever felt like you're falling behind, or that the programming world is moving so fast that it's impossible to keep up? Then there's the issue of knowing where to go to make sure you're up to date. Well, the answer is to join a community dedicated to discussing the latest in Angular. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you got Adventures in Angular all day? Well, you can, kind of. We've set up a Slack team for Adventures in Angular that you can join, and that means you can connect with our listeners and guests on a platform you're most likely already using. Plus, we've set up a Keeping Current channel that pulls stories from across the web to help you know what people are talking about. And coming soon, we'll be holding monthly webinars and roundtable video chats to connect with experts in the community and with each other. So come join us at adventuresinangular.com/Slack.
In the same moment. So basically, yeah.
So a couple of quick background questions for you. How big was the app? Let's just measure it in, say, number of screens. And was it public facing? That's question number 2. And question, like, do you have like consumers, or is it internal business people? And question 3 is, what was your consideration about whether to just like start all over in Angular versus try and do the upgrade?
Okay, so about screens, more or less 6 screens, but with tons of components. So I would say it has more than 2,000 modules, more or less. so AngularJS modules, and it was all modularized. So 6 screens, which doesn't seem to be a lot, but actually a lot of components, so a very interactive application. And
so it was a very dense information screen then, set of screens then, presumably, right?
Exactly, and with different states.
Yeah.
So if we count the different states that a root can take, it would be much more than just 6 pages.
Was the user a sort of a business user or a casual consumer user?
Business users, and the application is not facing the public.
Right. So it runs on a desktop or a tablet. Were you trying for mobile or not?
No, it's only a web app. It's not even responsive. So
yeah. I think you're already on the way to answering the third question, which was why, do I start all over and redo it entirely in Angular, or do I upgrade? Because it sounded like you had, with over 2,000 components, it wasn't something you could do in a short period of time. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. So, and the point is that we still have much more features coming. So it's not something that we could just pause for a bit, the development, upgrade, and then continue. So we still need to keep on shipping new components. And the nice about this strategy is that we can already ship new components in Angular 4.
Yeah. So where did you sort of decide to attack it? If you had like 6 screens, did you have to completely replace one of them with the new Angular, or did you try and split one of them up into a combo, or how did you decide where you were going to attack it?
You did say you're using ng upgrade with this, right?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
I didn't mention that, but yes, we're using ng upgrade. And about the strategy, so first of all, we thought that it would be really nice to start from the reusable components. So then we tried, but we started to have a lot of duplicated code, and it was starting to be a bit harder to maintain. So then actually we started like taking the most simple ones. So let's say, for example, the login page, which is kind of simple, and then migrating pretty much everything. And then when we looked at some other screen that it would be really a really big thing, we actually avoided that. So taking the easiest ones first, the simpler ones, and of course, as there are many reusable components, even if we're touching a simple screen with not as many components, we're already touching a reusable one that is used across many other pages. So taking the smaller screens gives us this the performance boosts. So we don't need to load Angular.js application in this page because it's fully migrated, right? So then taking the simpler ones, and then already many components, the reusable components, were migrated. So when we take the bigger screens, we can actually, we already have a lot of work done, right? So we can continue from that. That's pretty much the strategy.
When somebody loads an Angular.js page, does it also at the same time, like let's suppose they launch the app and the place they want to go is one of the Angular.js pages. Does it also load the Angular library at the same time?
Yes, it does, because it's doing the bootstrap through the Angular application. So
Gotcha.
there's this migration shell, as it's called, and this loads the Angular application. So we're not using AOT. And this was something that we could think like, so the performance hit would be not as nice for the end user. But what we figured was that our needs were much more specific. So we need actually to have a nicer responsive time as after the first load, but the first load being a bit slower is actually okay because we don't have a bounce rate as our users needs to go through anyways.
Yes, that's so true for so many of our business applications. I know that we are, and I think rightly, all concerned about time to first interaction. And that's why I asked about whether it had business users who were sort of a captive audience or not. Because if they have a captive audience, let's face it, that you can make them wait.
Exactly. Just a little
Suckers.
bit. Right?
Sucker, you're stuck in a journey, right? Hey, I'm paying you, so sit, wait for me, have a cup. But no, I mean, obviously we would love to be able to improve the experience for them as well, but at least you don't have to worry about the employee saying, that's it, I hate this app, I quit.
Exactly.
But the reason I actually brought up the question of whether it loads both at the same time, and I don't think it's going to necessarily matter for you, but last night I tripped over a PR that I was going to write about from Victor that allows Angular to be lazy loaded later, which means that with require or something like that. And I haven't really quite looked into it, but if it was an issue for you, I wanted to say that it looks like help is on the way, because Victor was looking for a way that when you landed on an Angular.js page, you didn't have to sit around and wait for it to load regular Angular before you could start using it. It would get you going and then load Angular in the background. And I don't know much more about it than that, but that I saw a PR. And so for anybody who's listening and wants to know, that's sitting out there waiting to happen.
Yeah. This kind of thing needs to be measured, because it sounds pretty nice, right? Just let's lazy load everything, let's make it faster and stuff like that. But sometimes it doesn't really matter for your kind of application, and then you spend some effort, setting this up, and then like the end result is not it's not worth it, right?
That is such great wisdom. I hope everybody's hearing that.
So for example, for us, one of our challenges is being actually the animations, because we used to have pretty much all our animations triggered by the AngularJS directives using the animation module. And for some reason, we still didn't figure this out. So then, like, as we're upgrading, we're losing a bit of the animations. And also the translation. So we're still not migrated in that area. So actually what we're doing is still using the Angular Translate module from AngularJS. And this is actually something that actually requires I would say a medium amount of effort. It's not very trivial to set it up, I would say. And it's much more important than, in our case, of course, lazy loading in the first load. So, for example, lazy loading the AngularJS library framework. So, yeah.
Sure. That makes good sense. Can you talk a little bit about what your internationalization needs are? Do you need it for translation of the data that comes over, or just for the static assets on the page?
Just for the static assets so far. But yeah, we have plans for supporting also data coming from the server.
So did you try Angular's I18N facility? And where does that stand in your thoughts?
So we checked out the guide on the docs, which is very, very nice. And actually what we decided was to wait a little bit and focus a bit more in the components we needed to make faster. So that was pretty much the main reason for adopting Angular over AngularJS. We needed a bit more performance in some components. So we still didn't get there. So as I said, it's a huge application. There are many teams involved. And for example, the internalization is one of the areas we didn't evolve that much. But we're definitely looking forward to implement it. The I18 and module, the official one.
Great. That happens to be improving also as we speak. So by the time you get there, it may be easier for you to use.
That would be lovely.
Yes, it would. You said the driver was the performance of components. Can you tell us a little bit about like where it was a problem in AngularJS and where you're seeing or expect to see benefits by using an Angular alternative?
Absolutely, and it's not a secret. I think that everybody already faced the same problem. So we have big lists. So let's say more than 2,000 items in a ng repeat. So that was causing our application to be sluggish. And the users were actually complaining quite a lot. So not complaining about the first initial load, but about clicking on a select box, for example, and a custom select box, of course, and then it taking quite a lot of time just to be interactive. And we were expecting gains by adopting Angular, and we already had. So pretty much the biggest pain point was actually solved.
Well, that is good to know. Did you have to do any special kind of tuning? Did you have to use the on push state, or was it just right out of the box without doing anything special? Was it fast enough?
Fast enough, just by out of the box. Actually, what we avoided was to have the ng model directive being applied on input fields. So we were actually doing the binding kind of manually, but not using observables or immutable data structures, which would actually be even faster, I would say. But yeah, just by out of the box, we got a lot of gains. That was quite awesome.
So how far would you say you are to being completed? Do you know how many individual things you need to rewrite, or is it like halfway done, or what would you say?
To be honest, it's quite hard to say because, as I said, the application is evolving a lot over time. So, but anyways, the new components are being written in Angular 4, but sometimes we also have to deal with the legacy somehow. So I would say not even halfway done, but we can already say that we are seeing the benefits, which is like the most important thing, I guess.
Yeah, well, that and that anything new that you get to write, you're writing it in up to date. You're not writing old things that are eventually going to have to be refactored. So that's nice.
Exactly. Like we're trying to keep the old stuff isolated, and we're not really bothering to touch it as long as we need.
What do you think the total, calendar time will be for this conversion project? Just so that people out there who are looking at their own stuff can sort of, the biggest question that they always have to say is like, what's it going to take, in terms of effort, and also what's the kind of time frame that I should be expecting? Because that's the kind of information that you need to take to your manager if you want to propose upgrading. So what's the kind of time span over which you expect this to happen?
So I expect that in the end of 4 to 5 months, we can call it a day.
Okay, that would help people. Is there anything that you wish it did that it doesn't do yet?
What do you mean?
Well, you're doing this conversion, and so you're deep in it, and in anything I've ever been involved in, as happy as I am with how it's going, there's always something that I wish was solved, or I hit my head against it, and I went, how maybe I have some advice for people downstream, or maybe there's something that could make the product better, would make it a little easier for you to do this conversion.
Okay, so I wish I knew in the beginning that it would be possible to use the CLI to help me out. But also, I wish I knew that maybe moving to your build to Webpack would help you a lot to get started, because I spent a lot of time actually fighting Browserify and Babel to get around it and set up my hybrid application. That if I knew that, I'm pretty sure that our migration would be further ahead at this moment. So I just wanted to share this one with the audience. And I don't know, I think that other than that, as soon as you get the hang of it, you write your first components, and then you write the unit test for your first components, and you see how natural it feels, and you just keep on going. It becomes automatic. So that's my experience so far.
Are you trying to figure out how to stay current with Ruby and Rails? I'm putting on a 2-day online conference called Ruby Remote Conf. You can check it out at rubyremoteconf.com. Like I said, it's a 2-day conference where you can come and listen to speakers and experts from all around the world talk to you about issues pertaining to Ruby and web development. We have an online Slack channel, a roundtable discussion on Zoom, and all of the talks are given over Google Hangouts, and all of the talks will be streamed to you live. Come check us out at rubyremoteconf.com.
It becomes automatic. So that's my experience so far.
Did I hear you say that you're writing tests? Is that true for the new?
Sure.
Wow. Good job.
Oh, man, I've got my hands over my head. I wish I had a cheer button. We would be, kazoo.
Yeah.
Well, it's so easy to write then in Angular, right? So why not?
Preach to the choir, my friend.
Yay!
Are you using the unit testing utilities and writing component tests for your components with their templates, or are you just writing tests for the classes?
Yes, so we're writing tests just for the classes, but for the crucial components, we're actually testing the templates as well.
The Angular version of integrated tests. Interesting. So what are your thoughts so far about that? I mean, it's also very interesting that you're doing both kinds, right? Mm-hmm. So when do you choose? Why not just do everything using their integrated, these integration tests that test the templates as well? Why not do it all the time? And what are your thoughts so far about your experiences? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it in between? You said, I guess you prefaced this you said it was easy. So is it easy?
All right. So to be fair, if you're new to it, it looks a bit scary. But as soon as you, as I said, get the first ones running, you feel a bit more comfortable, I would say. And the reason for not adopting integration tests for everything is that they're not that cheap, right? So pretty much testing the public methods of your components is like way cheaper to write and also to run those tests. And the integration ones are a bit more harder to set up and also a bit more expensive to run.
So can you define for people new to testing what you mean by expensive or cheap?
Sure. So pretty much when you unit testing your components, you're kind of mocking everything, right? And then when you're dealing with your templates in this Angular integration testing world, it's actually a bit more expensive because you need to actually have the templates and template manipulation. So we're actually dealing with the DOM somehow. Even on headless browsers, you're actually doing those manipulations somewhere, right? So your tests can catch the state of the HTML and assert against that. So that's what I mean by cheap and expensive.
Another way would be to say, well, I mean, there are two ways in which I find it expensive. I think the way you described it was that they take a long time to run. Is that what you were meaning there?
Yes, yes.
Right. The other way in which they're expensive, in my experience, is that they're very brittle. They're unnecessarily brittle if your UI is changing a lot, because things move around, and so you just to find out if something really happens, you change one little thing, and then you were looking for it, and oops, your end-to-end test broke, and it's not really, half the time it's a problem with your test, not with the underlying code. So you visit it over and over and over again, and that's particularly challenging when the app is new. Now that would be less of a problem for you because you already have a well-defined result. So you should be able to pretty much know what the outcome is supposed to look like, and therefore write your end-to-end scripts. So I guess you'd mean mostly expensive in the first sense, that it takes a long time to run.
Exactly.
Oh, we're not talking about end-to-end. We're talking about integration tests.
Oh, I thought we were talking end-to-end.
No,
we weren't talking about not yet. Have you written any end-to-end tests?
Actually, not.
Okay, so you're just writing.
Oh, what planet was I on?
So maybe it's worth again making throwing this definition out here, right? You have unit tests, you have end-to-end tests, and then there's this middle ground that in some technologies is called, some places they call it integration tests or functional tests, which usually means you're testing a few pieces of your system. In Angular, they have that concept, and that means that you're testing a component and its template working together, right? And that you may at the same time be testing its subcomponents, or you may not. But if you are testing its subcomponents, they call it a deep integration test. If you're not, they call it a shallow integration test. But it's the the testing of a component and its template together that is coined a integration test. And so it looks and runs just like a unit test, right? Except, well, from a conceptual standpoint, it's like a unit test because I'm just testing one piece of thing, but now it's not just the code, it's the code and its template working together. And so the setup is tons different. It's almost as difficult as setting up an end-to-end test in some ways.
All right, so this is where I jumped in.
Yes, but I would say that what you just said also is a reasoning for being a bit more expensive to write, right? Because as you're dealing with your templates, if they change so much, your test will also need to be changed. And then actually you should evaluate, right, if it's worth it or not to write those, because they're not as cheap as unit tests. Basically.
Have you been bitten by that? Have you written some integration tests and then found that you're just changing the template a lot and backed off and canceled? And
actually, it happened the opposite, to be honest. I was actually fighting to set up this sort of integration test for a component that was actually not changing much. And then in the end, I was just like, all right, I'm spending a lot of time on this, but maybe it's not even necessary, right? It is there, it's working. We're not changing it a lot. So maybe we can just write the test for those later. And then we didn't write at all, and it never broke because we're not changing. And there are other tests covering it. So actually, it happened the opposite. But
so did you? I'm confused. Did you end up actually writing integration tests for them, or did in this case, or did you just not write integration tests for it because you felt like
no?
You didn't.
I gave up. I gave up. And then in the other scenario, like when it changed a lot, I just changed my tests a lot. But that was okay because it was actually important to make sure that it was tested. So
cool. So we're getting towards the end here. I think there's a wrap-up question I'd like to ask, and I don't know if anybody else has any other questions.
Well, I wanted to push back on whether testing the interaction between the class and the components template is an integration test, but I can leave that for another day. I don't. Just to be.
I feel like we need to have a testing episode.
I don't think that qualifies for reasons that I could give, but I concede that it is harder to write. In other words, if you can just test the component class without its interaction with its own template, then that is certainly invariably easier and often sufficient. But I am still inclined to believe that the component and its template travel together, and they need to be tested. They often need to be tested together, and that isn't a real. That's such a close-in integration test that I could argue that that's a unit test. But we'll get into that another time. Where were you going, Joe?
Or just as a response to that, whether you agree or disagree with that statement, Mishko, I think Mishko officially coined an integration test in. I don't know if it's in the official documentation. I think it is, but that's been like the name bestowed upon what that is, and it's less about, hey, this is what people would consider to be an integration test, and then let's call it this. It was just that he wanted a name for it, and he chose the word integration test with deep and shallow. Certainly, there was this blog post about it.
Well, I'll push back on that. First, who the hell is Mishko, and what does he know? But secondly, if you're talking about the documentation, since I wrote it, then that would have to be me who called it an integration test. And so I'm gonna go look at that again. But we're gonna have fun with this topic another time. Sorry to drag you all into it. Let's just agree that it's harder when you have to interact with the template, and that it's not always worthwhile, as Ciro said. However, getting back to the expensive question, it's not that it's slower. It isn't. It doesn't run slower to talk to the template in the same way that end-to-end tests are manifestly slower. The tests run pretty quickly, but you do have to develop a new set of skills to be able to write tests where the class, where you're testing the class and its template together. That takes some new skills that you can, and effort that you can probably do without. And I write those too, just so you have my vote there, Ciro. It makes perfect sense. And now we can get to Joe's question.
All right. So for my final wrap-up question would be, looking back at everything, do you feel like you made the right decision with the direction that you went with this?
Yes, definitely. So it was the best decision, I would say. I don't regret it at all.
Cool.
And word up, if you have this AngularJS application and then you need more performance, you're not confident on migrating, just try it out. I really recommend you to get a sample project. Just create yourself a to-do application and try to migrate it for fun. I'm pretty sure you get confident, and then you can apply this knowledge to your real application.
Does your team need to master AngularJS? Oasis Digital offers Angular Bootcamp, a 3-day in-person workshop class for individuals or teams. Bring us to your site or send developers to ours, angularbootcamp.com.
I'm pretty sure you get confident, and then you can apply this knowledge to your real application.
All right, well, let's go ahead and head into the picks. Ward, do you want to start us with picks?
Well, you know what? My pick is going to be thank you, Ciro, for coming on and giving us some real-world experience on this upgrade business, because people are desperate to know what it's really like for real applications. And so thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, Joe, what are your picks?
So I'm going to pick a board game that I was playing recently called Mystic Vale. It's actually like one of those card games. It's a really fun game. It's easy to pick up and learn, and it's fairly quick to play. It plays in less than an hour, depending on the number of people that you've got. There is one expansion pack. It's got a very unique mechanic for board games. So I highly recommend, if you're looking for something new and interesting to play, I can highly recommend that, Mystic Vale. That's my pick.
All right, Alyssa, what are your picks?
So mine is a game as well. So it's actually hilarious, and I don't know how appropriate for work. Maybe it's appropriate. I don't know. It's called Organ Attack, and basically you and your opponent have like a set of organs, and you attack each other's organs with different diseases, and the last one with an organ left wins. So yeah, it's hilarious. It's by the Awkward Yeti, if you've ever heard of this person - comic. So yeah, Organ Attack.
Nice. Your pick reminded me of a TV show I used to watch, and so I'll pick that. It's called Invader Zim. It's a Nickelodeon show. It was on a long time ago. It was only on for one season. It's one of those shows that's tragic that they didn't make any more of them. But anyway, he's an alien, and he's kind of an idiot, and it's freaking funny. But anyway, he goes to school, and his arch nemesis is this kid, and anyway, he goes and he basically gets all these organs from all these animals, and to show the nurse, because he had to go in for a health check, and so if he had more organs, then he was healthier. Anyway, it was really, really funny. So it's a crazy show, but really funny. So I'm gonna pick Invader Zim. Ciro, do you have some picks for us?
Yes. So my first pick is this tutorial on the Google developers. It's called Getting Started with Headless Chrome. So this seems to be very, very promising. And I just wanted to point you to this little tutorial so you can try it out. It's it will probably be a replacement for Phantom.js in the near future. So just to keep in mind. And the other one is this Chrome extension created by a friend of mine, Zeno Rocha. It's called Code Copy. It basically puts copy to clipboard functionality everywhere that contains a snippet of code. So you can just copy that and paste where you want.
Does it like copy it as an RTF or something?
That's a good question. You should install and try it out.
Okay. Gotcha.
All right. Well, if people want to follow up with you or check out your company or get advice on how to upgrade an app, where do they go? What do they do?
They can just drop me a line on Twitter. So I'm at Ciro Nunes Dev.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you for coming. We're going to go ahead and wrap this one up, and we will catch everyone next week.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.